Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Three Black Pratt Grads. We thank you for checking in. This is our 95th conversation, and we're just talking photography. My name is Kenneth Nelson. I'm here with my good friends in conversation, Mark Skinner and Greg Cleghorn. We're all graduates of the Fine Art Photography program at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. Additionally, each one of us brings decades of professional commercial photography experience to our discussions. In this episode, captioned Film Hoopla, I thought we'd talk about our experiences with film, uh, basically using film, and any film, all types that come into mind that you may have used. And just for those who are interested in hoopla, the definition of hoopla is, of course, well, not of course, extravagant promotion or publicity. This is from an online dictionary. All right. So I just wanted to put that in your mind. Now, admittedly, I bring this up because I've been seeing many people sort of using film for the first time. And in my opinion, having it seem like it's something new and extraordinary. In the early days of digital photography, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but the prevailing attempts was to have sensor pixels count and density match the quality of film resolution,
What?
sharpness, and ISO speeds. I say it was met with the creation of the 35 millimeter full frame CMOS sensor. And so I think at that point in time, there was a sort of a switch from what capabilities were film and what now digital was capable of taking over from film, hence the birth of the modern day digital photography. Uh, Now that digital sensors have totally surpassed ISO speeds, low light capabilities of film, now it seems that that may be too clinical for those who have grown up in the digital world. So with that in mind, I wanted to use that sort of as a jumping off point. So earlier
In the
this week,
digital world or analog world? Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Did you
no,
mean for those who've grown up in the digital world or the analog world?
for those who've grown up in the digital world, we are now in the digital world, and those who have not had experiences with film, the film world. So therefore, what they're doing now, from my perspective, in my opinion, is they're looking at film as newfangled, uh, the new technology, when in fact it's old. you know. So again, it's a pet peeve. So I'll admit it. It's my own pet peeve. So that's where I'm going with it. So with that in mind, I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that I've seen in on the internet over the past couple of weeks, and I'll share them with you, and we'll use this as a jumping off point too, because you guys have seen this. So in this particular window, this is Freestyle Photography. They're an online sales group, and what they've are now selling is a psychedelic blues film, a film basically that has been pre-exposed for light leaks, which is something that technically is something most professionals avoided at all cost. But now this is something that people are intending to do intentionally. So where does that leave? Where does that go? What's up with that? You know, can you still see the screen? Okay, good. So in this particular screen, this is a website called Blind Photography at First Sight, and this was uploaded in September 2020. And why does film photography continue to be so popular? I don't know if that has been the case, but I know that it wasn't popular years ago. That's why it was losing its market share to digital. Here's another online magazine. And is film photography a trend, or is it here to stay? I'll provide links to these online articles in the comment section below on YouTube. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of this as well because I think it's interesting. And this particular screen, this is of course a Facebook, all right? And I just decided to just do a real quick search on Facebook to find out analog photography and that word analog to differentiate itself from being digital. So right now I only see, well, right now I guess there are three groups. There could be more, but there's all these photography groups dedicated toward the old technique of analog photography. And I just also want to bring up the pet peeve about analog photography being called analog to differentiate itself from digital, as well as just maybe just calling it film photography. So again, semantics, but analog photography, I just could easily call it film photography.
I
So,
got a quick
yeah,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
The images with the light flare,
Uh-huh.
is that like a has that become like an art movement now, or is that just something a few folks are experimenting with, or is it like something that's entrenched already?
I don't think it's entrenched yet. That because I sent the link to you guys, I think earlier this week, so that was the first time I've seen it. I don't know when it was first introduced, and I don't see a date in which this particular page was uploaded, so I couldn't tell you. But I just think it's kind of interesting that that is actually out there now. And I'll start. I wanted to go ahead. Go ahead, Greg. I lost your voice. We can't hear you.
Mm,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I wanted to say there was also a photographic convention that you didn't shoot solar flares either, or lens flares, excuse me. That was kind of a no-no or a mistake or a rookie thing, in stills and in cinematography,
Mm-hmm.
movies, whatever. But
Yeah.
just go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
True. All right. So now I want to just go over a little bit of my own history with photography and film. And so I'm just decided to just go back into history and just show you a little bit of images that were done. 1987, and of course this is not the first time I've took
Oh
photographs
man.
with film, but again, this is 1987. I was shooting with color film. It was not new
Beautiful
to me.
shot, Ken.
So thank you. And of course, it's the color yellow and the reds. So that's the particular thing that I think drives this image, most of it. And so to me, film was always a tool. And when we were told to experiment with film, we were told to experiment to get to the vision that we'd like to achieve for the rest of our life, not to go on a perpetual tour of newfangled things to do. And so that's sort of, I guess, what I'm seeing is that there's no stopping to focus on one particular film and to just become an expert at that. Another photograph taken, this is 1988, again, color. Again, remember, these are all scanned negatives. So even within the analog world, the film world, to some degree, we're still digitizing things. But that being said, the origin of this and the intent for this particular image was always print. It was not digital because, hence, I processed it back in the 80s. That not then, and again, remember that that's not necessarily the case for anyone who shoots now who's shooting film. It may not be the case that their intent is to print. It could be that they're just shooting film to shoot it so they can scan digitally and still use it in the digital realm. 1991. Here we go. This is 1991. So as we're going through the years and progressing, I'm still shooting color film. Now I'm also shooting black and white as well because I'm processing my own film. But I'm still, and again, to be honest with you, I can't tell you what film this is. I couldn't tell you if it was Kodak or if it was Fuji or if it was something else. I couldn't tell you if it was 100, 200, 400, 1600. The only thing I can tell you, because it didn't matter to me afterward, was what film speed it is. I don't care. I shot it. This is later on, 1999, when I switched over to medium format and started shooting medium format color. And of course, again, the yellows and the reds are a prevailing thought, at least for now. This doesn't mean that I've been shooting yellow and reds on almost everything I shot throughout the years. It just means that for this particular purpose, it seems like I've just edited out images that were included yellow and red as for some reason. And so I wanted to give you this one because I thought it was interesting. So we were talking about, and again, I produced about those images that were the film that was pre-exposed to light leaks. Well, this was shot with a box brownie, and this was shot on color film. you, the intent was not to photograph it and to have light leaks, but you got light leaks anyway. So
This is recent.
this is 19. This is 2000.
Okay. Okay.
But again, 20 years ago, I was getting light leaks and I was using a box brownie from a technology that was from the 1930s or 20. What year, Mark? Box brownie.
The brownie, box brownie?
Yeah, box brownie.
It might be anywhere from the 20s to actually probably from the early 1900s to about the 1950s.
Yeah. So old technology, right? As old as can be, still being used. Okay, so what I then want to
You're ahead
do.
of your time, Nelson. You're ahead of your time.
I'm sorry. I hear you, Greg. Mark, what did you say?
Was it a brownie Hawkeye?
No, box brownie.
Yeah, it might have been the early 1900s.
Yeah, box brownie. And so, growing up, we switch over to black and white. And again, I've been photographing black and white and using black and white and processing my own. But I just wanted to show you that, yeah, there is a definite difference between color and black and white. Hence, the tonalities here are really the most important part of the image. But again, it's black and white for the control of it. Just go through this a little bit more. These are some shots I did. And again, the acuity, the quality, the graininess of the film is there. That's what attracted me to these images. And even in a digital scan, I think I don't know if you are able to actually elucidate whether these are shot with film or whether it was a digital shot or not. I hope you can sort of guess that it was shot on film. And the last, I think this might be the last one. Again, shooting with film, black and white. It's not something new. Now I can tell you because I just was I was just doing some research on these images. These were shot with Ilford FP4, so the black and whites were all Ilford FP4. Because at some point in time, I started to realize that I needed to sort of guess which film I was shooting for which situation.
The FP4, that's ISO 125, right?
125, yes. Yeah, and so when I went out to shoot these landscapes, I definitely wanted the sharpness of slow speed film because I wasn't shooting anything that was moving too fast.
Plus, in the desert, you don't want all that light for 400. You didn't need to have HP5 anyway.
I didn't need to have HP5. So, gentlemen, that's where I leave it at now. Let that sink in, and for people out there who are thinking about it.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you combined all these photographs from the late 20th century, not quite 2000, but the late 20th century that have a lot of red and yellow, like mustard and ketchup. And I was starting to think a month ago about Ernest Haas, because we talked about Ernest Haas a lot, and how his images, they always talk about the nostalgia of the styles of the clothing and the styles of the what do they call it, this cars and so forth, and you do a lot of the reflection type work. Mm-hmm. But I think part of his popularity is just as people came home from World War II and grew weary of olive drab. When you get back home, all of a sudden you've got a whole world that looks like ketchup and mustard. First of all, how many hamburgers and hot dogs you're going to get overseas, and then secondly, when you come back home and everything's more festive. And I was looking at the Sabret's Frankfurter stand. Those are kind of like the few things that are still at least in Manhattan, that red yellow combination today.
Yeah.
Look at that color combination. If you look around, everything's really sort of a chartreuse and a really bright sky blue with little bits of purple. There's like a bright violet, a bright blue, a lot like your shirt, and the chartreuse. Those are the three colors that have kind of replaced that yellow, that mustardy yellow, that red, and and sort of a dark gray, like a black almost. Those are the three colors that permeated the mid 20th century in Manhattan.
So are you relating that to digital photography, or are you just relating that to?
Well, I was talking about the imagery, but in terms of digital photography, but in terms of film photography, I think the way film photography renders yellow, renders blue. We had the, Kodachrome was famous for its red, and
Right.
and Kodak yellow, you mentioned it earlier in your presentation. I think certain colors were enhanced by the technology, or the technology and the culture sort of merged to create a record of the times. And I think now, if someone's going to be photographing in color film, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get that same sensibility. But I think film does have the ability to give you, like you said, all the tonality that we tend to look for in photographs.
Yeah.
There are very few manufacturers now making sensors with that kind of sensitivity consistently. As you mentioned, most people are trying to get speed, low light, just to get an image. And if it's contrasty, it's okay, because most of it's going to be on a screen anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Greg, what you got to say?
Wow. Well, what I was gonna say was how let me gather myself for a second. Uh, one of the fun things about shooting in New York was that I don't know, maybe not for you guys, but well, in Manhattan, in particular, you're always fighting necessarily, but you're like all this concrete and all this. There, the city by itself is kind of more or less colorless, but definitely the Sabrett's umbrellas for the hot dog stands were the pop of color, Nathan's bright yellow. So there was always that. But black. Someone mentioned that, and I didn't really pay any attention to it. But when I got back to New York, a lot of people wear black.
Yes.
And that kind of lends itself to black and white photography, because the grays of the city, black of the concrete, and that heat coming off of the pavement in the summertime, and the white chalk of salt in the wintertime, it kind of almost screams, let me shoot some black and white. But the fun part of it, like you pointed out, like the texture that you get in those saturated yellows that you could just get, straight through the camera, were phenomenal. One thing I was going to mention, the way you proposed it, or the way you presented it, I couldn't really get a handle on why on earth would you want to do film now when digital has already surpassed it. But I mean, for me, if I was going to do something like that, because I never want to be in a dark room again, it's that the film has a grain texture, and if you shoot it at a higher, or you scan it at a high enough resolution digitally, you'll maintain that. And I could see that being an allure. If you haven't been in a dark room, you can say, I mean, it'd be a nice, sip and dip kind of a party. Have some red wine in there, and while you develop your film prints. But I don't know. I mean, I personally, I kind of like that people are getting back into it, because it's the origins. It can be fun, and when it's done right, ugh, nothing else like it. That's all I got. You got something? Were you finished, Mark? I'm sorry.
No, I can wait to my.
Yeah, Mark. Let's for the sake of argument, let's just continue on and move on to what Mark's got to share.
Yeah. Okay. I only have one photograph, and it is a Tri-X photographed scene of the Manhattan Bridge down in the Dumbo area. Actually, it's in the Domino Sugar refinery area. They're rebuilding as Domino Sugar Park, and
really?
That is a photograph that was photographed. It was Tri-X, which is ISO 400. It was rated at 320, and then it was pull processed by half a stop. They scanned the negative for me, just like we talked about in the Tri-X episode. And then when I brought it into my image editing program, I quite honestly, I just put a border around it, and I allowed the levels to automatically to see what it would do, and it just sort of tweaked the contrast just a smidgen. Didn't really do much. And then I gave this to Ken for this presentation. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about film today versus before is, you photograph with film, you hand it off to somebody because most people aren't set up to do this processing for black and white. Film was really three things for us. There was black and white, which most people did themselves. There was color, which a few daring people did themselves. But for the most part, you could just drop it off at any drugstore, and within an hour, you could pick up your negatives and prints. And then there's color slide film, where you were a professional if you were able to get the exposure just right. And one of the things that you were talking about was like, who wants to go in a dark room, right? But the big deal about a black and white photograph and what it was made it so accessible was it required just enough science, just enough math to be interesting but not intimidating. And there was a whole process. There was a body of work to learn about how to expose the film, how to load the film on the reel to put it in the canister without the light leaks, how to process it without getting sprocket marks, splash marks, bubbles, all of that. And so you learned a craft. You learned to do something more than what we do now, because now everything is primarily point and click and a little bit of typing. And so it doesn't matter what profession you're in, there's a lot of point and click, and file open, file close, file. So everything is in the same procedure. Photography was very much different in the analog world. I think that's the appeal. And I think film is here to stay for a while. And even though toxically for the planet, it was horrific, right? I understand that the black and white developers that they're trying to create now are far less harmful. They're Rodinol style. They're based on coffee, that you can just pour down your sink without worrying about destroying the planet. So I think black and white photography will certainly be here for a very long time, wherein the films like the transparency film, which was made primarily for presentation and projection, other than the film industry, you might not have that much more.
Yeah, I would tend to think that the market that you're talking about in terms of processing your own black and white film is a very, very small market. It's probably niche to the point of being 1% of those people who actually enjoy black and white photography. I would think so.
But there's so much equipment that's available. And I've noticed the black and white camera prices slowly rising over the last few years as interest has become greater. I mean, Raleigh still makes I think a film camera. You can only get it in Europe or something crazy like that. It's like the Raleigh 6, and it's a medium format style camera and is with changeable backs and all that. But it's there is an interest in film, and the idea, all the show that goes with it, building a dark room, using the trays, being a little bit of a scientist with the chemistry. And there are a lot of people who really just enjoy that. It is going to be, I'm sure, as much as an elite hobby as gardening or candle making, or people with discretionary income who want to do something besides sit in front of a computer terminal.
Yeah. Okay. For the sake of moving, I just wanted to move on to you, Greg. So why don't you include your comment in your presentation?
I will do that. Mark mentioned how photography is just kind of just point and shoot, and the cameras, sensors, and dynamic computer program will do the rest. I feel like I've had a different experience. I'm not going to say people do in general, but knowing or having the background in photography and having to do those calculations in your head, I found myself sometimes overriding. I'll go into a situation, take my meter readings here and there, and then throw the camera into manual and never let the camera, camera's electronics do anything for me but capture the image, because it's every lighting situation that I go into, I kind of look at it like it's dynamic. And unless I'm shooting strobes where I know I'm always going to be getting a certain amount of lighting every time I click that shutter, no, it's not point and click to me. I mean, there's just so much automated stuff that you can do now with these cameras, and it's great. I don't knock that at all. But I mean, you could if it's done right, whatever medium you choose is great. This is a great topic, Ken. Thanks again. Now, as far as black and white and the nostalgia of it, why it's resurging.
Not necessarily it has to be black and white, just film in general, because I think that's
Film in
the key
general.
of this. The film hoopla, the
Okay.
experience that we're having today. That if when you look at Instagram, when you look at social media, the bombardment of the analog world, the bombardment of small camera, 35 millimeter film cameers,
Uh-huh.
they're all over the place. But your image is
Okay.
up, so let's speak to your
Yeah, I
image,
see.
Greg.
I see. All right. Let's keep it rolling. Well, for me, with the experience I've had, then doing photojournalism, doing some fine art stuff, and doing some shows here and there. I love color if it's done right. Not maybe like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting or something like that. I love her Southwest colors and saturations and flowers and that whole motif. But like the old school shooters, that started and did nothing but black and white. There is nothing visually for me that can take the place of a well printed Ansel Adams tin zone black and white image. It just has, it's like the difference between waffles at, I don't know, Wolfgang Puck's or Gordon Ramsay's or on the grill with Uncle Tim. You know what I mean? It's just, there's just something about a well done black and white image that for me never be replaced, and I'm glad people are getting their fingers wet, in analog photography. I don't have a problem with the analog because it's not digital, unless you digitize it. And like
But it
images
is
like this
film.
is true. Yes, it is. Excuse me. Like images like this, all the detail, and it becomes a different image completely, different look, feel, taste, smell, sound, and color.
Okay, I
Color.
got to ask you. Is
Yeah,
this
go
a
ahead.
digital image or is it a film image? I can't tell.
Ah,
I have
ah.
I have my supposition.
Of course you do, but I ain't telling.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I mean, in like before, Mark said, well, Paul, what time of day was that shot? I'm like, does it matter? I mean, if it's an image that is appealing and pleasing, or just sets you off and sends you to some foreign place, did it do its job? I think so. Does it matter if it's analog or digital? I think the medium is not always the message. I think sometimes the message is the message. So I'm just going to leave this up here. If you guys believe it was shot in digital, fine. If you think it was shot in analog, fine. If you think it was shot in analog and you switched to digital, fine. If you thought it was digital and you switched to black and white, fine. What do you think of the image? That's what I want to know.
Well, I think ultimately it's a digital image now, and I think the idea that that the film image is going to be radically different from the digital image, other than a few subtleties and the means by which you get there. No, but I think the process is something that people enjoy with film, and I think one can become bored with the digital process uh, if
Really?
if it becomes very routine. Now you mentioned the difference between waffles and Wolfgang Puck. I mean, sometimes for people it's the difference between chicken and waffles. I mean, sometimes it just goes together. If this is a film photograph, it's been scanned and it's been posted in a digital forum. And in order to view this, it had to be open. and display. And I'm really talking more about the idea of what the post-production procedure is, not so much the initial image capture. The initial image capture, the manufacturers have all done a fine job of replicating a film camera very well in the form and the f-stops and the ISO dial. All of those that functionality is the same. And 90% of what I do, probably 99% of what I do is in manual as well. And yes, you override it, and you don't even have to use a meter these days. And yeah, you can just take one quick image in the area and then understand what your corrected exposure should be without even using the meter. Although using a meter will allow you to do that beforehand.
Well, for me, I mean, using the meter allows you to, have your control in the image, because the camera will average the whole screen,
Right,
Sometimes
but
I don't.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sometimes I don't want it to, but go ahead. Your point.
Mhm.
Right, what I was going to say is, it depends on the topic. I mean, if you're doing street photography, you've kind of got to, if you're going to meter, you're going to meter get your idea of what your basic exposure is going to be. And depending on whether or not you are photographing someone who's, that has side lighting from the sun, side lighting from a window, side lighting from a car lamp, it doesn't matter. You kind of have to, or frontal lighting, whatever the directional lighting is, you're going to get an average first. And then you might not make too many changes, but if you're really kind of trying to work the scene, you're going to make minor changes on the fly as you photograph all your different subjects.
Okay, guys, that we're getting off the topic, which is Film
Okay.
Hoopla, so I want to
All
bring
right.
us back. Okay.
Oh man. Because what as far as shooting street stuff, what drives me absolutely nuts is not metering. The camera will slow that shutter down when you least want it to. And that drove me nuts. Anyway, all right, moving right along. Well, all I got to say, don't change the picture yet. Yeah, that's it. Whatever you, too late.
Yeah.
Whatever, whatever you choose to do, take it to the nines, man. If you want to do analog now, do it. Do it the best you possibly can. Explore. Maybe you can find something that the old school folks didn't think of. This is a new world, new age, and imagery is just exploding. And I'm glad people are getting an idea of the pain that we went through when analog was all we had. Um, I did like a Plus X and Panatomic, the slow black and white films, to get the richest, deepest colors, and then I would print on Ilford's best papers when I could afford it, and the results that I would get with that. Delicious, delicious. There's the textures and the tonalities. It's just, they're just, for me, visually, it's just a feast for the eye, literally. Uh, and like the sign says, don't fool around, and don't beat that meat. Just you can't beat black and white meat. That's what that says. That's all I got. Keep shooting.
Okay, gentlemen.
Oh, but here's the
Uh,
question: do you think film will stay? That's really the real question. Is it a
Oh
trend?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that kept it going were the old school Hollywood cinematographers who grew up with film and trust it. And sure, you can digital. I know they know, like you can look at an image or as a lighting situation, and you could say, 5.6, 125, 150, two
Right.
fifty. It has to be this.
Right.
Boom, 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 boom. The line,
Even the producers
and you
of
don't trust the
before that, they
electronics.
went back
Right?
to Ektachrome, right? They went to create the look of the time.
Absolutely.
well,
There are things that film can do that digital can do, but you have to know what to tell it to get it that way.
mhm. Well, in one of the articles that I'm going to link to, uh, kind of interesting that the person who is speaking to the whether film is a trend or not, or the other one, the person's experience with film is less than 10 years. So
That's a lot of time if he's dedicated to it.
it is, but I think he said he's gone through 200 rolls of film in that time.
Uh, mm.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
but really mention the fact that digital was created to save time and money for the commercial photographers, quite honestly, particularly the
The
news
immediacy
people.
too.
I'm sorry, was that?
I'm sorry, time, money. But when an
But
event
it was
like a
basically
photojournalist stuff, you'd
right.
shot it and you could have it in DC or around the world in under a minute. You
Right,
can't
and
beat that.
that was the big appeal. Otherwise, you'd have to photograph it, then you'd have to process it, and then pack up prints, send them overseas.
Right.
That was the main issue.
Yeah, but that's not really what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that the people who are actually using the film are not those people. The people who
Right.
are
No,
using film
no,
are enthusiasts, right?
right,
They're not professionals. And
right, because they want more than sitting in front of a computer screen. They want a new skill set.
well, I would propose, and I
And I
think
wouldn't say necessary.
most of
Go ahead.
them would not actually own a darkroom. I would dare to say that 99% of them probably wouldn't even think about owning a darkroom, but they love the film aesthetic, and maybe even the look of film, even when it's scanned, because they know that there's that difference. So, that's another question for maybe another episode, which is, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, is it a duck? Is it a true duck or not?
Might be Bugs Bunny dressed up like a
Okay.
duck.
Okay, gentlemen, as we close out, we've won a great deal of time, but again, I think this is a great topic, and we might even come back to it. So, any closing remarks, really quick, under 30 seconds? No?
Keep shooting.
Okay.
Keep shooting. Keep exploring. Photography never disappoints.
Okay.
And
And
I'll just say this one thing: when I photographed that roll of black and white, ultimately, in the end, I kind of wish I had processed it myself with one of those cheap coffee-based developers.
yeah, yeah. And as I'll jump off that by saying that and I was thinking earlier, which is I think, of course, historically, when someone in earlier times, 10 years ago and prior to the digital age, when they were shooting film, the intent was definitely going to be a print. That is now no longer the case at all, for a majority of images that we shoot. So that's another thought to put out there. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you've stayed with us this far, I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. We'd like to hear from you. We are the
Subscribe.
three Black Pratt grads. I'm Kenneth Nelson with my friends Mark Skinner and Greg Claycorn, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.